In an earlier video, we talked about the structure of the New Testament, the types of books. We talked about the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse. Just a bit of a review. The book of Revelation, now quite often, in fact, I would say more often than not, people refer to it as the book of Revelations with an S on the end, plural. That is like fingernails on a chalkboard to people who understand that that's not the way it's supposed to be. It's the book of Revelation. Because the very first words in that book are a revelation to John. John, assumably, was the author. So it was a revelation. So in any quizzes, any worksheets, any exams, anything you say about the book of Revelation, please keep it singular, not plural, because I might want to consider marking you down if there's an S on the end. Unless you're talking about all sorts of different revelations, but the book of Revelation. All right, so revelation, to reveal, to uncover, to show, to expose, if you will, all right, to reveal something. We get that because the word revelation is the English word for the Greek word, which is apokalypsis. That means to uncover, unveil, to reveal. So, okay, hypothetical example, baseball cap on, right? And I say, take off the baseball cap for a sec, so the baseball cap's taken off. And then you see the person's hair or lack thereof. And I say, put the baseball cap back on, so they put it back on. And then I would say, well, we've just had a revelation. We've just had an apocalypse because we have had an uncovering of the head. So it's a real simple concept. It's not some sort of like, very strange, mystical sort of thing, although there is a certain mystique about the apocalypse. But literally it means to uncover or to unveil or to reveal. You'll see when we get to the book that the very first couple of chapters talks about the context, and it was a revelation or some visions that were seen on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Ocean by John, who was the visionary. He saw this, and things were revealed to him. And many people have this misconception that the book of Revelation has all these horrific events happening. This happened, and this cataclysm happened, and this horrific thing happened, and then, God's judgment comes, and this happens, and the earth gets destroyed, and the lake of fire, and the Satan gets thrown in, and okay, that's the way the book is structured in its 20-some-odd chapters. But the misconception is always that, well, this is revealing the future, that this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and after that, so 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. And that's really not the way an apocalypse is meant to be interpreted. There were lots of apocalypses in the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian Scriptures. Parts of the Gospels have apocalyptic sections. The prophecy of Ezekiel, prophecy of Isaiah, the prophecy of Daniel in the Hebrew Scriptures, apocalyptic genre. Apocalyptic genre has lots of characteristics, but the few I want to talk about today is, there is this chronology, but really rather than just saying it's some sort of future events given in this particular order, it's not really that way. I want you to think in terms of being in a tornado or a hurricane. If you've ever seen the satellite shots of hurricanes over the oceans or whatever, there's this kind of spot in the middle where it's not so cloudy. It's the eye of the storm. It's a bit of peaceful calmness. So think in terms of the book of Revelation, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to the end, as John, the visionary on the island of Patmos, in the midst of this, and he's just saying, and then this happened, and I saw that, and I saw that. That he's just looking up at this swirling around set of events and individuals and characters and sayings and stuff. It's maybe not the best image, but I think it's much better than the one that's the chronological, then this happens and this happens, because that's not the nature of apocalyptic genre in any of the biblical passages in the Bible at all. So, the book of Revelation was written in not such wonderful grammar. It was like poor Greek grammar, like a third-year Greek student makes lots of mistakes, because you just do it for homework and on weekends and stuff when you have time, but maybe you can't speak it after 3 years. And so the Greek that is found in the book of Revelation for Greek scholars, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but this is what I've been told, is it's grammatically maybe not so correct. It's kind of thrown together last minute, it seems. Whereas John's Gospel, the book that was written a little bit chronologically after this, about 100 AD for that, this is around 95, and you can see that when you get to your Bible, and we'll read why that is. If you read Ehrman, why it was 95-ish, 100-ish for John's Gospel and the Apocalypse. John's Gospel is written in this beautiful, poetic, very erudite, very sophisticated, wonderful Greek language. But the Apocalypse is, well, and this happened, and then I saw this, and immediately that happened. So it's just like you're in the middle of this eye of a storm, and all this stuff's going around. So think of that image when we read the book of Revelation. A couple of other characteristics of the Apocalypse of John is, one of them is anyway, something I alluded to when we talked about the Gospel of John earlier this term, was the number 7. 7 means, it's a biblical number, it means fullness, totality, completion, nothing lacking, to the max, to the nth degree. And John uses this image of 7 because there's going to be 7 seals. Let's see if I can do this now. All right, so think of a scroll, old-fashioned parchment scroll. And the scroll is sealed with 7 seals, sealing wax. You get this waxy stuff, you melt it, it's kind of soft, and you impress upon it a signet ring or your initial or whatever it is. It hardens, and you take the seal off, and so that's a seal. That's what they used to use before. The old kind of old-fashioned lick the envelope stuff. Nowadays, you just pull off that thing and smack it down. But the seal was to make sure that nobody could get inside and see what was written. Well, okay, so one seal, good. But what happens if in the Pony Express bag, all these sealed scrolls are there and they jumble around, and so the seal breaks? Oh, then we get to see what was written to the person. So you seal it with a second seal just as a backup. Well, if there's 7 seals on this particular revelation, one seal is going to be broken, so you can see a little bit next. Then 7 means it is totally mysterious, it is totally secret, it is totally not knowable until you break the seals. So these 7 seals are broken, and at the breaking of each of the seals, something is revealed, something happens. Somebody does something, somebody says something, and after the 7 seals are broken by about chapter 6 or thereabouts, then there's going to be 7 trumpet blasts. And the angels are given these trumpets, and they blow them. And every time an angel blows a trumpet, something else is revealed. Something else happens. Something else is said. And at the end of that particular set of 7, so you have 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and then there's 7 bowls of the wrath of God. So the Steinbeck novel, The Grapes of Wrath, comes from this particular image in John's Revelation. And one of those bowls was the winepress of God, and everything is in there. And you press out those grapes, and it ends up with being the juice of the grape that turns into wine. Well, the wrath of God, that means it's God's angry. So you can see why, when we got to the book, why God might be angry and what this is all about. But the bottom line is 7 seals are broken, and that reveals 7 more things. And trumpets are blown, and that reveals 7 more things. And then finally, 7 bowls of the wrath of God are poured out upon the earth. And then ultimately, well, let me hold that thought. The storyline, but what is universal in most of the apocalyptic and prophetic literature of the Hebrew Scriptures is that it's going to get bad if you don't clean up your act, if you don't get yourself to be in a better situation with God and other people. It's going to get really bad. But ultimately, God wins in the end. And we live happily ever after. The misconception is the book of Revelation is this horrible thing with all this bad stuff happening, but ultimately God wins, and everybody gets to live happily ever after these sort of cataclysmic things occur. That's a characteristic of the book of Revelation. Another characteristic of the book of Revelation is that, I'm going to take a break, so I'm going to erase the board here, so just hold on. Another characteristic of the book of Revelation is the use of symbolism. For example, really famous symbol in the book of Revelation. Nobody wants this license plate on their car at all. Why? Well, because in the book of Revelation, that is the mark of the beast. whatever the beast is, and you'll see when we read the book of Revelation. It's a symbol, all right, 666. And the book of Revelation says, this takes wisdom to decipher what this particular number means. It's the number of a human being. It's a human number. And so when we get to read that particular chapter, the footnote at the bottom of the page will explain who they feel that the beast really is. Spoiler. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, D equals 4, etc., etc. So if you took your name and spelled it out, in my case, George, George, and gave a numerical value to each of those letters, G, D, I can't do it right now in my head, but I come up with the various numbers under G, E, O, R, G, E. And let's say, for example, you add all those numbers up. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc., all the way down. So let's say that I come up with a hypothetical number of 247. I'm sure that's not it, but just whatever. All right, so my symbol is 247 for the name George. So the beast has a name, it's a human name, and the scholars and everybody's come up with who they think maybe the beast represents in terms of what is that person's name. So wait till you get to that particular chapter to see who the beast might be. Symbolism is a characteristic of the apocalyptic genre, of the apocalypse, both of the Hebrew Scriptures and of the Christian Scriptures. Of course, the Hebrew Scriptures are part of the Christian Scriptures of the Old Testament and New Testament, but bottom line is, before the Christian Scriptures of the New Testament existed, there was the Hebrew Scriptures, and the Christians had the entire set of Scriptures. But symbolism and apocalyptic genre was present very much, as I said earlier in this little talk, in the Hebrew Scriptures, Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel, etc., etc. But why symbolism? What's that all about? Well, when the book of Revelation was written, about 100 of the Common Era, it was during the time that Christianity was an illegal entity. Christians were outlaws. And they weren't really allowed to be not outlaws. They weren't accepted as a legal entity until 312 of the Common Era. So from about, let's say 70, about, until 312, Christianity was not legal. And if you were found to be a Christian, you could be taken to trial, arrested, taken to trial, and possibly sentenced to prison, torture, death. You might be able to go free as well, but not likely, because you were illegal. And the reason that you're illegal, take a look back at the first chapter we read this term in Ehrman as to why Christianity was illegal. But the bottom line is, okay, so these Christians are living in this era of illegality. They're outlaws, and they got to stay below the radar screen so that they can't be found. And so when they are found, they might get arrested, right? So their way of communicating quite often was to use symbolism so that should they get discovered, should their writing get discovered, the Romans won't get it. They won't know what the symbols mean because they don't know that certain images from the Hebrew Scriptures, like the lamb, the one seated on the throne, the number 7, all these various images, they're used in this book of Revelation as pointing to something else, a different reality, something kind of under the obvious. So if in fact, and here's, I guess I'm going to give this away, all right? The fact that the beast, I want to save it for the class when you actually read the book, but here it is. Nero. Nero was an emperor. He's a bad guy. He killed Christians left and right. He killed all sorts of people left and right. He was nuts. Or the other possibility is Domitian. He also was not a very good person who hated Christians and had them killed, executed. So you can't say, well, the emperor is the beast. He's in league with the devil. You can't say that because that's seditious and you get arrested, get off to prison, tortured, killed. So you use codes that the Roman authorities don't understand, have no idea. What's a 666? What's that? I don't know, 666. So if they're referring to the emperor as the beast, the bad dude who's with Satan in terms of in cahoots with Satan, well, you can't use that, so you use a symbol. A is 1, B is 2, C is 3. So they came up with, and you'll see in that particular chapter, that Nero Caesar is numerically what 666 is. Well, what's he got to do? Because he lived in the 60s, and the book of Revelation was around 95-ish during Domitian's time, so 95 plus or minus a year or two. Well, Nero was killed. He was executed, and people said, yeah, he's gone. Everybody hated him. He was just, even the Romans, the pagans hated him. But there was this kind of theory, Nero might come back to get us. He may come back to life. So be very careful. So when Domitian became the emperor, he became maniacal, megamaniacal. He was a megalomaniac. And he was the first emperor to say that I am divine. Now, Nero was understood to be divine when he died. That was kind of the Roman take. The emperor dies, he becomes a god. Domitian was the first one to say, I am now. I'm divine now. Well, okay, people couldn't quite get into that. And the Christians, of course, could not sprinkle the incense to his statue because Christians and Jews can't worship anybody but God. So Christians were really illegal during Domitian's era. Code word on the street for Domitian, Emperor Domitian, right now in 95 AD, Nero come back to life. He's just as bad, if not even worse than Nero. Okay, so in 95, the book of Revelation is seen and written, and the idea being that, okay, well, we don't dare say that Domitian, our current incumbent, is crazy and he's evil, so we'll put it into code words saying, it's Nero. Well, Nero's dead. He's been dead for 40 years, so he's safe. Nobody liked him at all. But we're going to kind of up the ante in terms of the symbolism. We can't say that the beast is Nero. We're going to say that the beast is a human number, 666. And you figure it out if you can, but don't worry if you can't. But if you can figure it out, that's great. So 666, I don't know what that means. Good. Safeguard number one. Oh, 666 is Nero. Okay, well, that's fine. He's dead. No big deal. But Nero, they actually said Nero. This is what they said in this 95. This is what the Roman Empire people said who spoke Latin. D-I-V-I-V-U-S. Nero has come to life. Vivus, like vivace and viva. So he's come to life again because that was Domitian's code name on the streets of the Roman Empire. So symbolism all over the book of Revelation, not just the 666, but all sorts of symbols. You'll see the woman clothed with the sun, the archangel Michael fighting this cosmic battle. What are these trumpets? What are these seals? What are these bowls of the wrath of God? All of that symbolic. Because if the Roman authorities caught wind of what was really being said here, then the Christians would be pulled off to jail. And so you write it in code words. So that and the number 7 and all these other kind of symbolic things, really major part of what the book of Revelation is all about.